Now, this is a rather tricky thing to talk about because I was trying to use very, very simple language that a child could understand to explain what are really rather subtle theological, political, theological concepts like the notion of sovereignty. And of course, I'll be talking about this a lot more in other sections of the book. But the idea of clowns just fascinated me because it does seem to be the case that there are a lot of societies, and I give you examples of Tierra del Fuego, a lot of Aboriginal First Nations of California, this was the case. They have societies where no one is ever giving anybody orders. You don't even really give orders to children if you can possibly avoid it. But adults certainly never order each other around, except during rituals. Now, during rituals, gods appear and people give orders, but it's not the gods giving orders, it's the clowns. And the clowns are kind of both the police and the master of ceremony and the clowns at the same time. You have this crazy scenarios where the clowns are telling people what to do and then they're telling them intentionally wrong, or they're doing everything backwards to try to trick people and then penalizing them for doing it wrong. But I realize that this is kind of sovereignty in the raw, and the power to give orders and make up rules. And the clowns not only enforce rules, they can make up new rules because they're not bound by the rules themselves. So when that principle first shows up, it's contained by being made utterly ridiculous. And the California societies, for example, it's the kind of bums who don't really do much work and move from town to town and beg. They're the guys who are like ordinarily clowns, and suddenly you make them king during the ritual. But it's a way of making sure that nobody who's taken seriously has any chance of getting anywhere near that kind of arbitrary power. But you could actually see the evolution, especially along the Pacific coast of North America, whereby in California you have these festivals that go on sometimes for a week. And they're very important, and they involve gods coming. You need to do it to save the world. You have the clowns running things, but the clowns only have this kind of crazy arbitrary authority for a few days, and then they just going back to being ordinary people, or not even or bums even. Whereas among the Kwakiutl of the Northwest Coast and other Northwest Coast people as well, you have a whole winter ritual season. It can last 2 or 3 months, and during this period there are groups of people. Everybody has one name in the summer and another name in the winter. You switch identities when the winter ceremonial begins, and everybody in the summer is actually fighting over who gets access to what important name and who gets to play what role in the dramas of the winter season. But one of the key roles are what they call the fool dancers. And the fool dancers are clowns. They have giant noses, and they're constantly like getting very excited about their noses and blowing their noses on people, and they're obsessed with bodily functions and fluids in general, and they're also just kind of throwing rocks randomly and messing things up and doing everything wrong and confusing people. But they're also the cops. So if you do something wrong, they're the ones who penalize you. For example, if you accidentally use somebody's summer name in the winter when you're not supposed to, they'll like come and throw a rock at you and like penalize you, and you have to pay a martin for whatever it is. That people would have to pay 2 blankets. Money was blankets, insofar as they had money back then in the Northwest Coast. So you have for 3 months what seemed to be a clown police, and then that shifts in a lot of societies of the Great Plains to having actual police for 3-4 months a year, or during the winter ceremonials. They have their ceremonial season, which also corresponds to the big buffalo hunt. Huge herds of buffalo, and they would like mobilize on the buffalo, but the key thing is to make sure nobody goes off too early and messes it up. So they would have police for 3 months a year, but otherwise be totally egalitarian and decentralized. And the way they did that is they rotated. But so sometimes there would be warrior societies, would be a different one every year, would provide the police. Sometimes each clan would be 24 clans, so every 24 years you get back to the first one. The one thing you don't want is the same guy being the police 2 years in a row, right? So anybody who's police this year knows that like anybody they beat up might be the police next year. So it makes people, not take things too far and be too arbitrary about it. But anyway, there are hints here and there that there is an association between clowning and ritual policing, but it seems to be something largely forgotten. But there are hints that you have emotion from the clown police during the ritual to the clown police, like in the Quackdoodle during the ritual season, to them turning into an actual police society, which at first rotates and presumably over time in other societies becomes more permanent. So that's one way that sovereignty can be contained. It's contained in time, like those princes of the Paleolithic, the dwarf kings and giant kings and hunchbacks and so forth, seem to have only been kings during the season where everybody gets together in the winter, during the ritual season, and then everybody disperses again. Whether they were funny, we don't know.